Hello, I'm Professor Eduardo Navarro, and I work at São Paulo University in Brazil. And the title of my presentation is Place Names with the Tupi Postposition P in Brazilian Territory. A few decades after the discovery of Brazil, Portuguese colonizers knew about the existence of a unique native language spoken along the Brazilian maritime coast. Unlike New England on the northeast coast of the United States, Brazil experienced the new colonization of exploitation in the past. There was not an immigration of entire families as happened in the United States. The small number of white women who arrived in Brazil led to the intense miscegenation since the early days of the new colony. Unlike the colonization of Spanish America, the colonization of Brazil in the 16th century was eminently coastal. The language of the coast, commonly called the Tupi, only from the 19th century, was thus, due to its great geographical extension, valued by Europeans as an effective and indispensable tool for communication with the Indians and their mixed-race descendants. Without knowing such a language, it became difficult to live in the new land. This was because it was more spoken than Portuguese in the 16th century. The names of the plants and animals of Brazil, the food of the land, the household utensils, the instruments of work, most of them came from the language of the Indians. The Portuguese language of Brazil was thus strongly influenced by the language of the coast in its lexicon. There were also hundreds of indigenous nations of other languages in the interior of Brazil. Some of them were only known in the 20th century. Many of these Indians still disappeared in the colonial period, and nothing is known of their languages. The few names of this origin in Brazil toponymy have unknown etymologies. In fact, the languages of these peoples disappeared without leaving any grammars or vocabularies that had come to us. Tupi, Brazil's indigenous coastal language, has also greatly influenced the Brazilian toponymy. These indigenous languages was the one that originated most place names in Brazil after the Portuguese language. There are toponyms of Tupi origin in Brazil that end in P and B, and that compose a specific morphological pattern in the Brazilian toponymic system. For instance, IGUAPE, this is a name of a municipality in Brazil. it's composed by the following words. River. Qua, that is bay. Pe, postposition in. Its etymology is so, in the Bay River. In Old Tupi, as you can see, there were no prepositions, but just postpositions, like in Japanese and in many other languages. So we have other examples like this. PERUÍBE, it's another place name, the name of a town in Brazil. PERUÍBE, it's composed of the following words. Iperu. Iperu means shark in Tupi language. River. Pe, it's the postposition in. Its etymology is in the river of sharks. You can see here another example. ITAÍPE. Ita means in Tupi stone, rock. Means river. Pe is the postposition in. Etymology is in the stone river. Another example. Jaguaribe, or else Jaguaribe. Jaguar is the same word in English. This English word has a Tupi origin. River, and the postposition pe, meaning in English. Its etymology is so, in the river of jaguars. Tapiraípe, another place name in Brazil. It's composed from tapira. Tapira is the taper. This English word has a Tupi origin. River, and the postposition pe, meaning in. So its etymology is in the river of tapirs. A tapir is a large herbivorous mammal similar in shape to a pig, with a short, prehensile nose. The meaning of those Tupi nouns sound strange to us. In the Bay River, in the river of sharks, in the Stone River, etc. Why is that postposition meaning in used? Why is it used? Antônio Lemos Barbosa, a Tupi professor in Rio de Janeiro in the 40s, 50s, and 60s of the last century, was the first to call attention to the existence of the geographical names that include the postposition pe of the ancient Tupi in the Brazilian toponymic system, attributing the emergence of such names to the colonists and not to the Tupi Indians on the coast of the first centuries of Brazil. According to him, the postposition pe, for its locative sense, is used circumstantially, that is, in an adverbial adjunct, and often accompanies place names. For example, Piragipe. Piragipe, this word. Piragipe. Piragipe forming the place names Piragibe. The translation of this clause is, I swim fish river in. Literally, I swim in the fish river. Thus, according to those words of Barbosa, settlers with little knowledge of Tupi language, when they heard sentences such as this one, would have considered the circumstance Piragipe in the fish river as though as it included in itself the postposition P, as if it was part of that. Thus, Barbosa suggests that a form such as Piragibe would be of non-native origin. In fact, the phenomenon of using toponyms originating in a language according to the understanding of speakers of another language is well known. An example of this is the name Istanbul in Turkey. The ancient toponym Constantinople, from Konstantinopolis in Greek, attributed in the 4th century, was during the Middle Ages and with the takeover of that city by the Turks in 1453, replaced by Istanbul, in Greek, Eistenpoli. You can see here the etymology of Istanbul, from the Greek Eistenpoli, that is, to the city. The phenomenon is almost the same as that analyzed in this article, except for the fact that eis in Greek is a preposition and pe in ancient Tupi is a postposition. The peculiar use of the name of place was among non-Greek speaking Turks. Well, in order to test that hypothesis of Lemos Barbosa, according to which postposition P in place names was considered as a part of them by colonizers, who would be the true creators of that category of place names, we have got information in texts by others who had ephemeral contact with the ancient Tupi-speaking Indians. By doing so, we can move away from a colonial Tupi with European influences and get closer to the language spoken before contact. Thus, we take as a source of information the work Wahrhaftige Historia by the German sailor Hans Staden, who lived with Tupi Indians for 1 year in the 16th century. Regarding toponyms, he mentioned some that included the P, the postposition P, as shown here. As you can see, the text in German. And the translation is here. An island called San Sebastião by the Portuguese, e Meyembipe by the savage people. Another text that includes a place name having the postposition P in Tupi. The translation you can see here. They wanted to eat a prisoner in a village called Tiquaripe. Despite their ancient orthography and influenced by the phonology of the German language, the toponyms mentioned by Staden in the above quotations clearly show the postposition P. Meyembipe and Tiquaripe. He claims that it was the savages themselves who called the island of San Sebastian with that name Meyembipe. With regard to the village of Tiquaripe, the hypothesis of a parallel name given by the Portuguese is completely ruled out, since it was a Tupinamba village in an enemy camp, not frequented by Portuguese settlers. These Tupinamba Indians, they spoke the Tupi language. Another criterion for testing the hypothesis of the non-indigenous origin of place names with the postposition P in Tupi is to verify whether this phenomenon is observed in other American languages. A historically attested Potawatomi name for the Yellow River was recorded by the early 19th century American leader John Tripton in the form Wisahokuhmik. This spelling represents the Potawatomi Wezawagamek. Wezaw is yellow, brown. Gum is water. And ug is the locative suffix meaning at or on. Our research has thus enabled us to draw the following conclusions. The existence of toponyms including the postposition P from Tupi cannot be attributed to erroneous understanding of such place names by Brazilian settlers, as suggested by Barbosa. Ancient Tupi-speaking Indians of the past, with superficial contact with Europeans, also named the place using the locative postposition P, as the examples in Staden, who spent a little time among the Indians. This was certainly a linguistic effect of the ancient Tupi itself. Such a phenomenon is also found in other Amerindian languages as shown above. The fact that such toponyms appear, for the most part, on the coast, where ancient Tupi was spoken in the 16th century, shows that the linguistic phenomenon analyzed here was characteristic of that indigenous language. One can finally affirm that the toponyms with the postposition P are among the oldest names of Tupi origin in Brazil territory, having been created by the Indians themselves and not by non-native speakers of ancient Tupi. Thank you very much.
We're glad to have had Eduardo back with us. I don't believe that he's available for Q&A, but if you would like to have questions, we can make sure that there is an email available at some point for you. Thank you again to Eduardo for his second presentation of the conference, and thanks to all of you.